Somebody just asked me, he says, so what is this, like a magic genie? You rub it and magic happens if you have bitachon? What, you violate Shabbos, you eat pork, and then you just have bitachon and everything works out? So I said, funny you should ask that. I'm addressing this exact subject on Monday. The class is called The Honorable Rebel. And I want to tell you this. There are a lot of questions about bitachon. A lot of it does not seem to make sense. A lot of it is hard to wrap one's head around. If I teach for an hour and a half, I prepared for 4 to 5 hours. And I'm not resorting to hyperbole. This is the real deal. So, if you really want to know what bitachon is, and if you really want to be able to develop it, please, for heaven's sake, watch the classes. They're available 24/6, youtube.com/Rabbi Mendel Kaplan. And not because I'm giving the classes, but the information is incredible. It's just simply incredible. Many, I said many, yeah. Many books have been written about bitachon over the last 1,000 years. However, the Shar HaBitachon, a selection from the Chovat HaLevavot written by Rabbeinu Bechaya I, has remained the preeminent work on the subject. Nobody has been able to replace or take that special station in Jewish life. It all goes back to Shar HaBitachon. So instead of reading or focusing on later writings, go back to the Bible. The Bible of bitachon. Go back to Rabbeinu Bechaya. I use it as a springboard. All of the different books that have been written over the last 1,000 years are on my desk. Not at once, but they're on my desk. I'm looking everywhere. I'm reading, thinking, reaching out to others and asking. The more you will learn, the more you will be able to develop and nurture this incredible thing called bitachon. Okay, so a bitachon story. Rabbeinu Bechaya says that whilst we are obligated to do our part, we have to remember never ever to rely on our efforts. There's a world of difference between relying on your efforts and making your best effort. Making your best effort is required by Torah. Relying on your efforts is never a good idea. Why? Because your efforts will not necessarily yield the results. Where our salvation will come from is only in Hashem's hands. There's a tragic example of this. When you come to the city of Yerushalayim, if you take a good tour and you find out about the miracles of the battle for the reunification of Yerushalayim in 1967, you will discover that the IDF had but a few hours to plan this operation. One of the most difficult military operations of the 20th century, 21st century, pardon me, was planned in a few hours because the Israeli government never dreamed that they would be able to launch this battle and recapture Yerushalayim. The Jordanians, Yimach Shemam, I'll stand by that. The Jordanians, Yimach Shemam, opened fire and Israel had to respond. There's a place called Givat HaTachmoshet, ammunition hill. It's a very sad place. Many young soldiers died. And virtually nothing was accomplished. And at Lion's Gate, unpredictable things happened with relatively few casualties. Our efforts are very important, but you can never rely on our efforts. You have to do your part, and you rely on Hashem Yisbarach. There's an Israeli pilot, you know the Israeli Air Force is creme de la creme. There's an Israeli pilot, his name is Kalish, he's a chassid, amazing man. So he says like this, he says, you plan, you plan, and you plan. You train, and you train, and you train. You prepare, you prepare, you prepare. I said, and then what? He said, then you have bitachon. So there's this fellow who is in a tavern, another tavern story. He runs a tavern. He's good. He pays his bills on time. He's on a good highway. There's always customers. There's always traffic. There's always money in, money out. He brings product. He sells. He's paid his rent on time annually for almost 3 decades. He has a great relationship with the Paretz, with the local squire. He doesn't complain. The Paretz doesn't bother him. He always pays on time. Never an issue. One day, he gets a visit from the chief of staff, the Duke's chief of staff. He says, the Duke would like to see you. The Duke wants to see me, he says. He's got a very uneasy feeling. Those dukes seeing Jews didn't usually end well. He comes to the palace, and he's ushered into the office, and the Paretz says to him, all right, so I made a decision. I'm canceling your lease. The guy says, why are you canceling my lease? He says, do not even try to argue with me about it. I've thought about this. It's my final decision. The lease is canceled. You have 30 days to vacate. There's nothing to discuss. The man, tears well up in his eyes. He says, are you kidding? I got a family. I got kids. I got a livelihood. What are you doing? Paretz says, get out. He walks out. He's stunned. Where do you go from here? He's a chassid. His Rebbe lives in a town. You may have heard of it. It's called Lubavitch. He sets off for the town of Lubavitch. Now this story has 2 versions. One version is that it's the Mittel Rebbe, the second Rebbe, who's Chag HaGeula we are commemorating tonight. The one version is that it's the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek, his son-in-law, the 3rd Rebbe. We don't know which Rebbe it is for sure, but it was either the Mittel Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek. He comes to the Rebbe, and the Rabbeim were very busy people, but they would see all kinds of people. But usually you made an appointment. It took a week, 2 weeks, till you could get in. And he comes to the Mazkirut, to the secretariat, and he says, I have to get in. It's like dire. I have 30 days. My whole life is going to melt down. It's my livelihood. It's my parnasa. I'm going to be out on the street in 30 days. So they make some rearranging of the schedule, and they make a quick few minutes. He can go in and see the Rebbe. He walks in and he bursts into tears and he says to the Rebbe, I've had this working relationship with the Paretz, and he tells him the story of his life, and the guy he's throwing me in the street. He says, I don't know how to do anything else. I don't have another way to make a living. I have a large family. Where am I supposed to go from here? So the Rebbe says to him, there's a fellow named Beryl in your town. I'm going to write a letter to Beryl and ask Beryl to help you. And the man immediately thought of Beryl. Beryl is not such an unusual name. In his town, there was a very, very wealthy individual who was well-coiffed, well-heeled, well-respected, extremely capable, very well-connected. Beryl, his name was. He said, oh, great. I'm getting a letter from the Rebbe to Beryl. Beryl's going to, make the calls, as they say, and he'll take care of me. So he's very happy. The Rebbe writes a few words quickly, folds it, puts it in an envelope, and he writes the name to whom the letter is addressed. Without thinking, he takes the letter, he thanks the Rebbe. He walks out of the Rebbe's study, and then he looks at the envelope again, feeling all good, and he sees it's addressed to Beryl de Groisse. So gross or grois in Yiddish means big. And klein or klein in Yiddish means small. You know anybody named Gross? Or Grossbard? Or Grossbaum? I know somebody named Grossbaum. So gross, if your name is Gross, there was something big in your family. Apparently, my wife's family, they had big trees somewhere, and they ended up with the name Grossbaum. And then there's a lot of people named Klein or Kleinberg. It means small. Surnames are a funny thing, not for now. At any rate, a lot of surnames came about because of just the way people referred to people. So there was, for example, there's the name Geller. You know anybody named Geller? Do you know that most people named Geller, when the government said you have to have a last name, there was somebody who had a red or blonde beard. So people were known as Shloime the Geller. Why? Because he had a blonde beard. All the Hasidim had black beards, or white beards, or brown. And one guy had a blonde beard. They called him Shloime the Geller. His family is called Geller till today. Now, in this town, there was two Bettels. There was a short little Bettel, extremely wealthy. He's the guy we're talking about. And then there was Bettel de Groisse. Bettel de Groisse was a tall fellow, but that's where his status ended. There was nothing big about him. He was a very poor fellow. He couldn't get much done. And the letter is addressed to Bettel de Groisse, not Bettel de Kleine. He says to himself, this doesn't make any sense. Bettel de Groisse can't even help himself. How's he going to help me? He thinks to himself, I guess the Rebbe made a mistake. He probably wrote quickly. He meant to write Bettel the Kleine, the little Bettel, and instead he wrote Bettel de Groisse. He spoke to the Rebbe's secretary. The secretary says, look, I don't know what to tell you. I don't second guess the Rebbe. So he went to one of the Rebbe's sons, and he says, tell me, is it possible maybe that the Rebbe wrote, like Bettel de Groisse, but he meant Bettel de Kleine? The Rebbe's son says, my father doesn't make mistakes. If he wrote Bettel de Groisse, he wrote Bettel de Groisse. The man is baffled. Makes no sense to him. He comes back home, and he goes to the small little hut that is occupied by Bettel de Groisse, knocks on the door, and he says, I have a letter from the Rebbe for you. The Bettel says, wow, a letter from the Rebbe, that's exciting. And he opens the letter, and he's like, the Rebbe is asking me to help you. How in heaven am I supposed to help you? He said. The man said, funny you should say that. I had the same question. I said, look, if the Rebbe said I should help you, I'm happy to help you. I don't know what I'm supposed to do to help you, though. He says, you know what? Why don't you hang around with me? Having no choice, the man decides he's staying there until Bettel de Groisse helps him. The Rebbe said Bettel de Groisse is going to help him. Bettel de Groisse is going to help him. A few days go by, and he's miserable. He's stuck at somebody's house. He tries to spend half the day in shul not to be on his head. The guy doesn't know how to help him. The Rebbe said he's going to help him. What is he supposed to do? A few days into the situation, the weather turns foul. The skies are casted over, and they're gray, and he runs home to take refuge in this house, and there's a storm. But it's like a storm. Hail and ice, and it doesn't let up. It goes on for hours. He's sitting there, and the only thing that matches his mood is the weather outside. And suddenly there's a knock on the door. Goes to the door, sees a man who's drenched. His eyes are bloodshot. He says, please, I need to warm up. Please let me in. Please, I need to warm up. He takes a closer look. It's the Puritz. It's that squire guy. They pull him into the house, such as the ramshackle hut at the edge of the town, and he lays down next to the fire, and he's trying to warm him up, and Bettel de Groisse comes out, and he rubs him with some alcohol, and they bring him some nice warm tea, and slowly he comes to, and he tells them, oh, you wouldn't believe what a day I had. He says, we went hunting today, and then this storm broke out. I lost my hunting dog. The horses ran away. I don't know where the rest of the party is. He said, I thought I was going to die this afternoon. I'm just so grateful I'm alive. And as he comes to, he turns around to the Balabayas. He says to Bettel de Groisse, he says, Bettel, whatever, he didn't know his name. He says, Mister, I can't tell you how grateful I am. I'm the squire. I own this place. Whatever you want. Tell me what you want. So Bettel de Groisse thinks he's the Puritz. He says, I'll tell you what I want. I have this friend named Chaim Zelig, the guy who opened the door. Chaim Zelig is getting thrown out of his tavern by you. So I want you to cancel that order. I want you to let him stay. He says, done. Done. Chaim Zelig can stay. He turns around to Chaim Zelig and he says, I want you to know, I didn't really want to throw you out. He says, I don't know if I should tell you. He says, it's actually one of your people. He says, really? What's that? He says, there's this guy in town, this short guy named Beryl. He said, he loaned me money. I had some bad investments, and I can't pay him back. And he said to me that he has a brother-in-law who's on hard luck, down and out, who needs a place to kind of, put his life together. And he said to me the tavern is perfect for his brother-in-law. So he told me I should throw you out and instead let his brother-in-law move in. This is Beryl the claimer. He says, but this big guy saved my life. So a word is a word, a promise is a promise, and you will stay in the tavern. And this is what Rabbeinu Bechaya means when he says, you never know where your help is going to come from. There's a lot of questions to be continued.